The same questions are being asked across Europe, and nowhere are the effects of these tariffs more personal, more cultural than in Scotland. Scotland has a centuries-old relationship with the US, one built on more than just trade. It's about heritage, identity, and shared values. But now Scottish exports like whiskey and salmon are in the crosshairs of Trump's economic war. In New York City, our reporter David Wallace Lockhart visited the Caledonia Bar, a cozy whiskey spot that stocks more than 130 varieties of Scottish whiskey. Manager Jeff Winslow, originally from Greenock, Scotland, says the impact of the tariffs will be felt immediately. "We'll have to raise prices, no question," Winslow said. "If the bottles stop moving, we'll shift to American bourbon. But Scotch becoming obsolete, that's a very real risk." This isn't just about alcohol. Scottish salmon is another major export, and in the culinary capital of New York, it's a staple of high-end restaurants. Stephen Wong, a fish wholesaler in Manhattan, sells over a ton of Scottish salmon every week to Michelin-starred kitchens. "We don't farm salmon here like they do in Scotland," Wong explained. "So if the price goes up, restaurants either absorb the cost or drop the product." For both producers and consumers, this could mean fewer options and higher costs. In an already expensive city like New York, that's a tough pill to swallow. But perhaps most telling are the comments coming from Scottish business leaders themselves. "Tariffs are always unhelpful," one trade representative told us. "If they're here to stay, we'll find a way through. But our preference is clear: reduce them, remove them, and let us compete." That message is echoed by chambers of commerce across Europe, Australia, and even parts of Asia. Businesses don't want trade wars. They want stability, predictability, and above all, they want governments that won't use tariffs as political weapons. As the global economy braces for impact, the question now is whether Trump's America can lead in a world that increasingly sees it as a disruptor, not a partner. The United States may still be the world's largest economy, but influence isn't just about size. It's about trust, consistency, and the willingness to play by the same rules as everyone else. With each new tariff, that trust erodes a little further. So as world leaders meet behind closed doors, as protests grow louder in American cities, and as businesses from Sydney to Glasgow brace for economic turbulence, one thing is clear: this isn't just about trade. It's about the future of global leadership. Will the U.S. double down on this hardline path, or will it find its way back to the negotiating table? And more importantly, for nations caught in the crossfire, how long can they afford to wait? What if I told you that a single decision out of Washington is rippling across the globe, sparking protests, dividing allies, shaking global markets, and forcing governments from Europe to the Pacific to rethink how they do business with the United States? President Donald Trump has returned to the White House, and with him, a sweeping, no-holds-barred economic agenda. His first major move? A bold unilateral imposition of broad tariffs, some as high as 20%, on a wide range of imported goods. His message to the world is loud and clear: it's time to play by America's rules or pay the price. Trump's new tariff strategy isn't just an economic measure. It's a geopolitical gauntlet. It's a reshaping of the global trade order that's been in place for decades. It's America under Trump, no longer just setting the table, but flipping it. One of the president's senior advisors, billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk, attempted to strike a more optimistic tone, appearing via video link at a political event in Italy. Musk suggested a potential future where the United States and the European Union could build a zero-tariff free trade zone. But while that might sound like a promising vision, the reality right now is far from harmonious. Under the current policy, EU exports to the United States are now facing a 20% levy. That's not just a tax on goods. That's a tax on relationships, on trust, on decades of painstakingly negotiated trade agreements. And the reaction from world leaders? Swift, calculated, and increasingly defiant. In London, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is already coordinating with French President Emmanuel Macron. The two have pledged to stand united and consider retaliatory measures should these tariffs remain in place. Both leaders are emphasizing cooperation, but they're also sending a subtle warning. If America is going to act unilaterally, Europe may have no choice but to respond in kind. Meanwhile, back in the United States, discontent is brewing not just in corporate boardrooms, but in the streets. Tens of thousands of Americans have marched in protest against Trump's tariff policies and what many are calling a return to isolationist economic nationalism. From New York to Los Angeles, these demonstrations are the clearest signal yet that the president's policies are deeply polarizing, not just internationally, but domestically. And the fallout is being felt all the way in the Indo-Pacific. Australia, a longtime U.S. ally, has found itself caught in the economic crossfire. Despite a long-standing trade relationship and defense partnership with the United States, Australia has been slapped with a baseline 10% tariff on its exports to America. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, however, has taken a measured approach, refusing to retaliate with tariffs of his own. Joining the BBC to discuss the move, Peter Draper, Executive Director at the Institute for International Trade at Adelaide University, laid out why this may be Australia's best and only move. Retaliating would amount to self-harm, Draper said. Trying to cut a special deal with this administration? That would be playing a dangerous game. The U.S. under Trump has become unpredictable. Australia is instead doubling down on trade diversification, strengthening its relationships across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. It's a strategy the country has leaned on before, particularly during its trade conflict with China. At one point, China accounted for 40% of Australia's exports. When that relationship soured, Australia didn't retaliate. It absorbed the shock and pivoted. And now, facing a similar situation with the U.S., the government is choosing resilience over retaliation. But that choice isn't without cost. Draper points out that the U.S. only accounts for around 5% of Australia's export market, so the hit, while significant, is survivable. Yet there are specific sectors, like beef exports, that will be disproportionately affected. And geopolitically, the stakes are higher. This initiative by Trump pushes the region closer to China, Draper warned. It's a golden opportunity for Beijing to strengthen ties with regional powers and fill the gap left by an increasingly isolationist America. That, he argues, poses a longer-term strategic risk, not just for Australia, but for the entire Indo-Pacific. We're reading the tea leaves out of Washington with growing alarm, Draper said. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines all are concerned. And in Australia, there's a deepening fear of abandonment. That fear of abandonment isn't just a phrase. It's the title of a best-selling Australian book that Draper says captures the country's current geopolitical anxiety. As the U.S. moves further into an America-first posture, its closest allies are beginning to wonder, can they still count on the United States?